his multi-billion-pound defence pledge.
At this dangerous moment, the bond between our two nations is stronger than ever. We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world.
Israel's military strikes Lebanon in a series of attacks. Tonight we have a special report from an underground bunker in Jerusalem as people prepare for regional war. We'll be live in the United States as students at universities across the country stand off with police and security guards. The former DUP leader, Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, appears in court, charged with historical sex offences. And spooked military horses, unseat riders break free and injure a number of people as they charge through central London. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. A teenage girl has been arrested in Wales after a stabbing at a school left 2 teachers and another student in hospital. The school was put into lockdown for safety, with pupils released at 3:30 this afternoon. Well, tonight, a statement has been released by the head teacher saying staff are now working with police after what has been a difficult day. The statement also reiterated a call from officers for people to stop sharing a video of the incident on social media to avoid contempt of court and reduce stress to all those affected. Sky's Wales correspondent Dan Whitehead reports now from Carmarthenshire.
Emergency services guard the school entrance. At the gates, a parent's worst nightmare unfolds. Reports of multiple stabbings at this Welsh comprehensive. Rachel's 13-year-old daughter Arwen is in a lockdown inside her classroom.
I rang the school and they said they're not allowed anyone in or anyone out, but they couldn't really comment any further than that.
Did your daughter say how she was feeling at the moment?
Oh, yeah, she's scared, obviously. She says she's fine, but they all say I'm fine, but they're obviously not going to be, and what's going to happen from now on, I don't know.
Police and air ambulances were called late this morning to Amman Valley School, which has around 1,500 pupils.
2 teachers and a teenage pupil were taken to hospital with stab wounds. Their injuries are not life-threatening. A teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and currently remains in police custody. A knife has been recovered in evidence.
As a council, our priority now is to do all that we can over the coming days and weeks to support the pupils and staff in the aftermath. Today's events have come as a grave shock to the school community, to Ammanford, Carmarthenshire and further afield.
Well, it's 4 hours since emergency services were first called to this school, and finally the coaches are arriving at the pickup point as pupils are let out.
Just relieved we got him back here. They just told me to stay in class and not go outside.
And how was that? How did you feel?
I felt pretty nervous. Very nervous.
You're just pleased to be back with your mum now?
Yeah.
In an email to parents tonight, the school's head teacher said, "Today has been a very difficult day for us all in the school. It goes without saying that my thoughts are with the 3 individuals and their families who have been affected by today's incident. I wish to commend all staff and pupils for their calm and mature response during today's lockdown." Wales's First Leader Vaughan Gething and the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak expressing their shock at what unfolded here. The school will remain closed on Thursday as investigation work continues. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Ammanford, Carmarthenshire.
The Prime Minister said today that the UK will continue to provide unwavering support for Ukraine. It was during a trip to Berlin and a show of unity from NATO allies, a message to Russia, which came as the US President signed off on a multi-billion-dollar package of support for Ukraine. But Rishi Sunak was forced to explain how his government would increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030, £75 billion in extra funding for the armed forces. He said it was fully funded. Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, reports now from Berlin.
Old allies meeting to draw up a new defence framework in uncertain times. The red carpet rolled out. This, the Prime Minister's first official visit to Berlin, marking a new formal bilateral defence partnership. With Europe at an inflection point, this show of strength, all the product of careful coordination. No coincidence then that the PM's European tour comes as the US finally agrees to a multi-billion-dollar package for Ukraine. And this pair keen to focus the world's attention back towards their borders.
This decision shows that Putin miscalculated when he believes that the states in Europe, the Western states, the US would at some point let Ukraine down. We will never do that. But I will also be very clear the decision of the United States does not release us in Europe here from our task to further enhance our support to Ukraine.
At this dangerous moment, the bond between our two nations is stronger than ever. We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. Together, we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends.
That support costs. After yesterday's announcement of a UK commitment to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030, questions at home over the PM's priorities in the midst of creaking public services.
We have made a choice, and I'm not shying away from that choice. All governing is about prioritising. I've decided to prioritise defence because I think that's the right thing to do for our country. It's a completely funded plan. If someone is telling you that's the wrong priority, they should explain why they think that's the case when it's very clear that the international environment is changing.
This trip had two aims. Allies in Europe, flanked by the US, showing the world they're squarely behind Ukraine come what may. The PM's other aim was to make defence spending a key election plank. Now, many of you at home may want that money spent on other public services, but the message from the Prime Minister to you and Labour is that it's a fight he's willing to have.
A few times I'm grateful to be as short as I am, actually.
These spending decisions affording Rishi Sunak's stature on the world stage and in the barracks in Berlin, where the PM was shown new military equipment being developed by the Germans and Brits. Leaving Berlin with a deeper security partnership agreed in writing, the PM will feel this is a job well done. Back home could feel very different as voters prepared to go to the polls in the local elections. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Berlin.
Well, let's have a look then at how spending on defence has changed over the last century. During World War I, spending as a percentage of GDP was as high as 54%, before dipping as low as 2.4% before the start of World War II, when it rose again to 50%. The Korean War marked another smaller increase to almost 10% when almost 100,000 British troops were sent to Korea. Since then, it has almost consistently declined. Well, along with most European NATO allies and the US, defence spending has gradually dropped since 1980 to as low as 1.9% of GDP in 2018. But now the government has announced it will increase defence spending from 2.3% to 2.5%. That's $75 billion over the next 6 years. That's not taking into account expectations that GDP will increase too over that period. The government says some of that increase will be funded by a previously announced plan to reduce the size of the civil service, saving £2.9 billion, and £1.6 billion from an existing research and development fund allocated to defence. But to hit that target of 2.5% of GDP by 2030, even based on Treasury figures, another £2.5 billion will need to be found. That funding hasn't been set out, falling as it does into the next Parliament and spending period. Well, the US pledged $95 billion in aid to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan, with President Biden saying it will make the world safer. Our US correspondent, James Matthews, joins us now. And James, this aid package from the US very much in alignment with NATO allies. And tonight we're hearing more about American support for Ukraine.
That's right, Anna. Yeah, good evening. We learned that before the big money was rubber-stamped for Ukraine, Joe Biden was able to find $300 million in loose change, in Pentagon savings, to fund a batch of long-range missiles which have been sent to Ukraine in the recent weeks in secret and were used in recent days for the first time against a Russian airfield in Crimea. So that was a significant gesture, no doubt. But obviously this big funding, the $61 billion, that's the lifeline for Ukraine as it struggles in the conflict with Russia. Joe Biden described this signing of the bill as a critical, historic moment for the United States. It's been a long time coming. It was last August that he first floated the idea of bolstering Ukraine's defences to the tune of this funding. It has been a process of delicate negotiations for so long. It has been gridlocked on Capitol Hill. The fact that it's passed is largely testament to Biden's political skill and stark intelligence briefings shown to the key players, Speaker Mike Johnson and so on. Today in the White House, we saw Biden giving something of a victory lap, styling himself as a world leader standing against tyranny. This is a win for Ukraine, no doubt. Politically, it's a win for Joe Biden.
James, live there in Washington, thank you. Well, the US aid package involves funding for humanitarian support in Gaza and military aid for the US ally Israel. It comes as fears of a wider regional war continue and fighting intensifies along the Israeli-Lebanese border. Today, Israel's defence forces said it hit 40 Hezbollah targets around the Lebanese village Aita Ashab, which it says includes storage facilities, weapons and other infrastructure. Hezbollah said it fired 2 missiles at a building in the northern Israeli village of Avavim, saying Israeli troops were taking positions inside. In Israel, hospitals are preparing for regional war, building large underground wards to handle potential wartime casualties. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports now from Herzog Medical Center in Jerusalem.
It is a significant escalation, one of Israel's biggest bombardments of Lebanon so far this war. 40 targets struck in one Israeli airstrike after another, in response to Hezbollah's shelling of northern Israel. The Israeli government released this video of Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying Israel is targeting Hezbollah's command structure.
There is ongoing offensive action by IDF forces throughout southern Lebanon and also in other areas of Lebanon. The operational results are very impressive. Half of the Hezbollah commanders in southern Lebanon have been eliminated.
In the corridor, this is all sheltered because we're right under.
We're deep underground here.
We're deep underground. We're underneath the underground hospital.
Further south, Israelis are preparing for the war to escalate and become much worse.
Now, because it's built to withstand both biological and chemical attacks, we have an airlock which is built of 2 separate sets of blast doors.
We were given exclusive access to an emergency bunker deep under a Jerusalem hospital.
As you can see, it's also sealed off with steel doors.
In the last few months, they've been increasing capacity here to 350 beds, with more to come, extending the wards by another level underground to be ready for worst-case scenarios, like all-out war with Hezbollah, should it come.
The hospitals in the north will be overwhelmed with casualties, and they themselves may come under fire, in which case they'll have to evacuate patients to the centre of the country. The same as we did in the first week of the war with hospitals in the south.
Dr. Kane and his staff know that after October the 7th and the attack by Iran, the world has changed for the people of Israel. Are you confident you'll be ready here?
Yes, absolutely, 100% confident that we'll be ready here in the hospital. Absolutely.
Above ground, the hospital specialises in the use of ventilators and the treatment of adults and children. If it comes to it, even these most vulnerable patients can be evacuated to the bunker in just a few hours.
So here, this is the clinic building, and we're building another bunker.
They are preparing for a reality they hope never comes. But the near constant exchange of fire with Hezbollah in the north is only intensifying. And with each day this goes on, the risk of far worse escalation is not going away. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, students in the US are protesting against Israel's military operation in Gaza. Demonstrations have been happening across the country for more than a week, and tonight police have arrested students in Austin, Texas. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner is at the University of California in Los Angeles. And Martha, this has already led students to be sent home from at least one campus. So how seriously is this now being taken?
I think very seriously indeed, Anna, is the answer to that. These pro-Palestinian student protests have now spread from the east of this country, Columbia University in New York, where they began, to the north, the south and the west, where I am, at the University of Southern California. At their core, these protests are about the war in Gaza and the loss of civilian life here. But speaking to students at USC, they have two main reasons for coming out today. The first is a demand that their university cuts all financial ties with Israel. The second is more specific to this campus. A top student here, known as a valedictorian student, is a Muslim woman. She was due to give a speech at the university's graduation ceremony next month. Well, that speech was cancelled. The university administration say it was because of unnamed security threats to campus. They've not said what those threats are, so the cancellation of that speech has caused a great deal of anger here. You can see hundreds of students coming out today. It has been relatively well-ordered, well-mannered here, although I have heard a number of inflammatory statements, potentially anti-Semitic statements, being made here. And certainly the police here are on high alert. They've seen what's happened on the east coast of America. 10 students arrested today at the University of Texas in Austin, and I've counted a perimeter of around 30 to 40 police here, ready to intervene, they say, should things become more heated here. As ever, these protests testing that fine line between free speech and hate speech, between free speech and anti-Semitism.
Martha, live for us there in LA. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's just show you pictures in Texas as well. Similar scenes, obviously, arrests we heard earlier as well. Look at the situation there at the moment. It does look like there's a standoff. Let's just listen in very briefly. Watch out for certain words, obviously. So heavily armed police, as you can see, trying to hold back some of the students there. Once again, those protests turning difficult for the authorities. We'll certainly keep an eye on the situation there in Austin, Texas, where we'd heard earlier there had been some arrests. Well, today, Joe Biden also approved a law which could see TikTok banned in the US. American politicians are worried that the company could share user data with the Chinese government. But TikTok has promised to fight the legislation, posting today that it's not going anywhere. Sky's technology correspondent, Arti Nachiappan, has this report.
This one?
170 million users.
The most jammiest, runniest eggs ever.
Countless communities.
Say goodbye to your followers, your favorite creator.
This is what's at risk after President Biden signed a bill that could ban TikTok in the United States. Officials are worried that its parent company ByteDance, which is headquartered in Beijing, could be forced to hand over data on American users to the Chinese government. The bill gives TikTok 9 months to transfer ownership out of China, or it will be removed from app stores. But TikTok's not going down without a fight.
Rest assured, we aren't going anywhere. We are confident and we will keep fighting for your rights in the courts.
A legal challenge could take years to resolve. And even President Biden is to continue using the platform for his re-election campaign.
So many of you guys had questions about how we make our beef food. Come with me and I'll show you.
But nerves are already high for some creators who rely on the app for their livelihoods.
It's an amazing resource for us. We probably wouldn't be as large a farm as we are in our community if it wasn't for TikTok, because that's how we were able to connect with the community. I struggle with social interaction with people outside of the farm, which is why we went into farming, was for mental health. And so it makes me sad because I, for the first time in my entire life, have thousands of friends and people that I can communicate with.
Protecting users' data is what policymakers say is their main concern. But American social media companies also gather similar data on their users. What's more important here is what the ban tells us about America's relationship with China.
The political context for the TikTok ban in America is part of a long-running saga between the US and China, which is expressed through tensions on technology. It can be summarised as the US is really wary of China as a technological superpower.
On the face of it, a ban sounds final. But this is only the beginning of a long process. The next stage is in the courtroom. Arti Natchiappan, Sky News.
Sir Jeffrey Donaldson has appeared in court charged with historical sex offences. The former leader of Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party faces 11 charges, including rape and gross indecency towards a child. His wife Eleanor has been charged with aiding and abetting him. Our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins reports.
The focus of attention for all the wrong reasons. Sir Jeffrey Donaldson arrived to face 11 historical sex charges over a 21-year period. 1 of rape, 1 of gross indecency and 9 of sexual assault. His wife Eleanor, who was arrested with him, faces 4 charges, including aiding and abetting. The couple sat in the dock of courtroom number 3, separated by 1 prison officer and flanked by 2 others. A detective sergeant said police believe they can connect the accused with the charges. Sir Jeffrey Donaldson and his wife Eleanor each spoke just 3 times to confirm their name, to state their date of birth and to indicate to the court that they understand the charges they're facing. The 61-year-old is the former leader of the DUP and Northern Ireland's longest-serving Member of Parliament. He played a pivotal role when the party held the balance of power at Westminster. Released on bail on the condition there's no contact with witnesses, 58-year-old Lady Donaldson left the court without making comment.
Stand back, Jeffrey! Stand back!
The crowd outside had become much more vocal by the time her husband stepped out, forcing him to retreat to the courthouse for a short time for his own safety. Police had to reinforce their defensive lines to give him safe passage from the building. The case is back in court in 4 weeks' time. David Blevins, Sky News in Newry.
3 men are being questioned by officers from the National Crime Agency on suspicion of immigration offences. It follows the deaths of 5 people, including a young girl, as they attempted to cross the channel in a small boat yesterday. Well, the National Crime Agency says it highlights the need to crack down on gangs organising the crossings.
I can confirm that 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. The men, 2 Sudanese nationals aged 22 and 19 and a South Sudanese national aged 22 were detained last night and this morning by the National Crime Agency and our partners in immigration enforcement and will be questioned by investigators from the NCA at a police station in Kent.
Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer were united in their tribute to the former Labour Minister Frank Field at the age of 81. He was the MP for Birkenhead for 40 years, up to 2019, and later became a crossbench peer. The Prime Minister said he was a decent, moral and thoughtful man, and Sir Keir said his death was a profound loss to politics and the nation. A long-lost picture by the artist Gustav Klimt has sold for €30 million, £27 million, at an auction in his native Austria. The unfinished picture, Portrait of Miss Liza, was painted a year before his death in 1918, but was only rediscovered in January after an auction house found it had been hanging in a private villa for decades. Demeaning, insulting and left feeling terribly sad, the reaction of family members to reports that police officers shared graphic language about a stabbing attack in Nottingham on a WhatsApp group. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates were stabbed to death in June last year. After the killings, a number of officers shared messages, with one even forwarding them to his wife and friends. Our Midlands correspondent Lisa Dowd reports.
What happened to these students in their final moments as they walked home from a night out set off a chain of exceptional events. Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar were stabbed to death last summer by Valdo Calacane a paranoid schizophrenic who went on to kill school caretaker Ian Coates. The city was thrown into chaos as police worked to apprehend the killer. But within those moments, an officer wrote this message on a police WhatsApp group. So, 2 students on Ilkeston Road have been proper butchered. 4 section turned up and tried to hold their inners in. Suspects then made off and attacked a man in a car on Magdala and stabbed him to death. The families hoped to meet the officers involved. When Nottinghamshire Police said no, they wrote an open letter condemning the callous, degrading and desensitised comments. Barnaby's mum described how she felt when she read it.
So traumatised and so anguished by it, and I think probably the main word would be just hurt and terribly, terribly sad.
Grace's dad, a doctor himself, said he was shocked by the crude words.
It is so below par for any professional organisation. Any emergency worker will know that we do not use language that is so demeaning and so insulting.
It just makes this whole thing even worse for us to deal with. We've already got enough on our plates, and this doesn't need to be magnified anymore.
While the families recognise there was great bravery from many officers that day, they feel let down that they weren't made aware soon enough of the misconduct by others. The author of the message is still working for Nottinghamshire Police, and another officer who forwarded the message to people outside of the force has received a final written warning. 2 other members of staff have been sacked for their conduct in relation to the case. Nottinghamshire Police say it would be inappropriate to comment further while their investigation and conduct is being reviewed by the independent watchdog, the IOPC. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Nottingham.
4 people are in hospital after several military horses charged for miles through central London in the morning rush hour after bolting during routine exercises. The horses from the household Cavalry caused chaos, colliding with several vehicles, including a double-decker bus and a taxi. A warning: this report from Molly Malone contains footage of an injured horse.
It's not what you expect to see on your morning commute. Highly trained military horses, some visibly injured, running loose in central London after being spooked by noise at a building site. Captured here from the inside of a taxi and caught on CCTV too. But still, they continued to canter through the city.
That's one horse.
Yeah, that's one horse which hit the bus.
Abdul was working opposite a bus stop as he saw 4 horses charging around, one of them smashing into a double-decker tour bus.
I saw it smash the window so hard, and the people in the bus, the tourists, and especially the big tour bus staff, they were horrified.
Paramedics were first called to that road, Buckingham Palace Road, just before 8:30. A soldier was injured after being thrown off of one of the horses. Minutes later, 2 other soldiers were reported injured after being unseated around the corner at Belgrave Square. At 8:30, 2 of the horses were seen running east at Aldwych. At 8:35, the horses injured a member of the public on Fleet Street. And then at 8:40, the horses were caught by police in Limehouse in East London, more than 6 miles from where they set off. It was a quick operation. The horses captured by police and collected in an army horse box.
Thankfully, considering the frequency of exercise and numbers of horses involved, this type of incident is extremely rare, and we continue to strive to minimise the risk of this recurring. As ever, we are grateful for the due consideration given by the members of the public to not making loud noises around our horses.
Consideration which looked like this: people stroking and calming what were clearly alarmed animals. But known for working in royal ceremonies, gun salutes and military bands, there will be questions about how these horses were so easily spooked. Molly Malone, Sky News in central London.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Claire Ellicott, Whitehall Editor of the Daily Mail. Welcome to both of you. And among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian, big policy announcement. Labour pledges to renationalise the rail network within 5 years. More on that and other stories in just a moment. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories. A teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 2 teachers and a teenage student were stabbed at a school in Wales. The Prime Minister is facing questions about how he'll pay for a big increase in defence spending after he said he has made the choice to prioritise defence in the face of growing worldwide threats on a trip to Berlin today. And students protesting against Israel's war with Hamas have broken out at universities across the United States. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with Kev Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Claire Ellicott, Whitehall Editor at the Daily Mail. Welcome to both of you. So let's see what's on the front pages then, starting with the Eye, which reveals Labour's plan to nationalise UK railways. Lead story for The Guardian as well. They lead with Labour's pledges to renationalise or nationalise within 5 years. The Metro also leads with the end of the line for failing train firms. And it's also the main story for The Mirror. Labour will nationalise rail in 5 years. Meanwhile, The Telegraph's headline says Starmer refuses to match the PM's defence budget. There's a story about the teenage girl who attacked her teacher, allegedly attacked her teacher, leading the Daily Mail tomorrow. The top story in The Times says England is the worst in the world for underage drinking. The Sun leads with Princess Beatrice's ex-boyfriend having died of a suspected drugs overdose. The Daily Star's top story is about highly processed foods turning us into insomniacs. Zombies, their word. And the Financial Times has the headline, Brussels spearheads a dawn raid on a Chinese security equipment supplier. Well, don't forget, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for yourself while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Kevin and to Claire. Trains. Who thought we'd lead the bulletin on trains? Anyway, I love the way they've used the word nationalise. Isn't that because many people aren't old enough to realise they used to be nationalised? I don't know, Kevin.
Yeah, sure. Re-nationalised.
Yeah, exactly. Re-nationalised for oldies, yeah.
Absolutely. It was John Major's government, not Margaret Thatcher's, that broke the system up into 100 bits. Sold it off, and it's not been a success, should we say. And it's a hugely popular policy, this, and it's even popular with Conservative voters. So maybe this is another policy that Rishi Sunak will get around to nicking at some point if he can get over his ideological objections. But the truth is, it works better as a system, and you put it back under public control, and I think most people just think it will be better. It wasn't perfect under British Rail. Labour will create great British Railways, but it will be better. And Lou Haig, the Shadow Transport Secretary, reckons they'll save more than £2 billion on just clawing back dividends. That goes to shareholders of these privatised companies, which, you know, those fat cats are getting rich basically on public money. And much of it's already in public hands. Network Rail is, you know, the tracks and the station, the signals. Things like LNER up from London to Leeds, Bradford, Newcastle, up to Edinburgh and then Aberdeen and Aviemore. I'll go on if you like. But, I'll bore you. Yeah, every stop. I did miss out Peterborough, you're quite right. And York. Anyway, but I just think, you know, Labour spinners, you know how it works. They'll be delighted. They have got 4 front pages on a popular policy.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So just break down a little bit of the detail. People will be sitting at home, what will it cost me? So the point at the moment is, you said, Network Rail, you know, tracks and everything, and then the train operating companies. The point is they're on contracts, which what happens? Does that just slowly run out and then they automatically go into public ownership again?
Yes, well, the Shadow Transport Secretary, Lou Haig, is giving a speech tomorrow where she'll presumably lay out the detail. I think the idea is that all these companies have contracts, and when they run out, they'll renegotiate. Well, they'll take them back into public hands and run them separately, which is, I mean, it sounds great. And obviously, the rail network is a state. Everybody's got their own stories. It costs a fortune. Things don't run on time. They've been cancelled. It's awful. But the problem is that when, you know, we've seen in the past that when things are run by the public purse, doesn't always work out as well as you hope, and you could, I mean, who knows where it ends up.
Oh, I mean, those great private success stories like water. and rail and exorbitant electricity and
I know,
gas.
but
I mean, they're wonderful.
depending on how far we're going back, it's not always been
British
the
Rail,
best
for
thing.
those of us old enough to remember it, you know, it was not a great service. The trains felt filthy. The food was rubbish.
Have you been on trains? No, have you been on trains now? I mean, like, the amount of money going into the system in the British Rail days was a fraction of what is going in now. And I would say from my own experience that the real price of fares was a lot lower. Tickets in real terms were lower then. I mean, it's just, there's a reason no other European major country has a privatised rail system.
Yes, the Metro has Labour nationalised rail in 5 years, the end of the line for failing train firms, a little bit like you. Election promises to axe the franchises, but industry warns political plan will raise costs. So does that mean if the taxpayer's now funding it, we do pay?
Well, this is the Daily Mail's got a version inside, which Labour will be pleased that, you know, we're covering their policies. And it's nice to see them have a policy, you know. It's nice to hear about what they might do if they do win the next election. And rail chiefs are warning that, you know, it's going to cost billions. I think 10 billion is the price one put on it to nationalise the railways. The fact is there's a system in place at the moment, and I'd imagine that, you know, quite a lot will have to be ironed out, you know, as much as private companies do make money from these contracts, they wouldn't do it otherwise, which is why some of these contracts have already been nationalised. They do also put money into long-term improvements and make the service better. And you want to see that happening, really, and whether that happens if you nationalise it, who knows?
Yeah, but because they put money in to take money out. That's how the private sector works. So if you stop that money
but they also
going
make
in...
efficiencies, which is why it works as a system.
Yeah, going in... I'm not sure we've really seen those efficiencies. This is where the market has failed. And in this case, like, you know, the market can be very dynamic and successful in some areas, but it has not worked in rail. Because... You see, like, on the LNER, again, the one that goes up to Newcastle from London, blah, blah, blah.
Darlington, Almouth, I remember the names.
It must have, it must have, I think it's gone bust, or companies just decided to walk away from losses 3 times. And then we have to step in, so it becomes private profit, and then the taxpayer has to pick up the bits and try and put them back together. I just think that's fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, well, as you say, I mean, it's dominating a large number of newspapers, isn't it? I can't remember a Labour policy making this hit. You know, I mean, the question I was just finish up with, is it going to be hugely popular, or do we wait to see how much it might cost in the future?
Well, I think people will think, great, because the system is so bad at the moment, so I do think people will welcome it. As you say, maybe the Tories will pinch it. I think they've already got some plans to nationalise some of it.
Tony Blair resisted it in his time. Gordon Brown didn't have it in 2010. I think Ed Miliband had a version in 2015. Corbyn did 17-19. It's one of the few policies that's on Keir Starmer's platform when he stood for the Labour leadership in 2020 and won it. That survived. Just water renationalisation's gone, power's gone, but rail has survived. It survived for a reason, because it is very popular.
OK, well, let's talk more about Sir Keir Starmer, what he will and will not put his money towards. Daily Telegraph suggesting, Claire, that he refuses to match the PM's defence budget. Tell us more.
Yes, so what's interesting about that, Rishi Sunak's had this big announcement. He's gone to Germany and to Poland to say that we're going to increase defence spending as a proportion of GDP to 2.5%.
In Berlin today, for example, as well as Warsaw yesterday,
Yes, by 2030, which is going to cost an absolute fortune. I think 65 billion is the price that they're putting on it. Labour has been asked, would you do the same thing? So the Shadow Defence Secretary, John Healey, said that it would also be an ambition for Labour. But I think Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Attorney General, she said that they would have to take a view as to whether or not they could afford this. And this is going to be the central debate, whether or not this is affordable, because it's happening in 2030, that's 6 years' time. Who's going to be in power then? Who knows? But Rishi Sunak says it will be paid for by cutting 72,000 civil servants, by getting rid of some of the waste in the system, by having people on the front line rather than pen pushers.
A massive expansion since 2019 in the civil service, he suggested. Presumably COVID, you know, led to a lot of those appointments because the state was running so much.
You know, sacking those people will buy you a couple of tanks. I mean, look, it's not even going to touch the surface, is it, on the amount? But, of course, Boris Johnson said in 2022 he would go to 2.5%, which it was when Labour left office, and it fell under the Tories, but go back by 2030. Then Sunak said, no, we'll do it whenever we can, which is the Labour position and the Liberal Democrat position. And all of a sudden he's behind in the polls and he's in big trouble. And so he goes, right, let's do it by 2030. But I think, Starmer hasn't said he'll match him. But Sunak can't explain where that money will come from. It's an enormous amount, so is he going to increase your taxes? Is he going to increase borrowing? Or is he going to cut health, education, transport, law and order, the environment, housing,
so health and education are protected,
potholes? Yeah, well, but how are you going to fund it? And of course, the other thing, I think the other fundamental question, and Labour hasn't challenged this, and the Lib Dems haven't challenged it, the SNP might, is why? Why anyway? Why go bigger? How can you prove spending more money will improve your
he did explain that in Warsaw yesterday, didn't he? For example, if you block the Red Sea, you don't get trade, you get inflation.
Yeah, well, how can, right...
And we know inflation and oil prices have gone up because of Russia's invasion of
How can he prove you will unblock it by spending a bit more money? The whole point about being in NATO is it's collective defence. There are 19 of the 32 countries that don't pay their 2%.
Yeah, that's true.
Britain is already over the target. Why?
Well, that's why you go to Berlin, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, that's why you're seen on the world stage to make
if you get a nurse or a doctor, you can see they can treat people. If you get a teacher, you can see how they can educate people. If you just get some more equipment, you can't see how it will impact.
Well, if you have the Ukraine war, you can see your stockpiles running out and see where the gaps are.
Don't we have to spend better, not more, when you think of the absolute uselessness of a wasteful, incompetent Ministry of Defence?
Because procurement takes so long is part of the problem.
And it is over budget, and it's always too long. We've got two aircraft carriers.
If you look at Joe Biden, who's on the front of the Financial Times, a large proportion of this enormous money he is putting towards to Israel, Taiwan and Ukraine is going to be spent in America. So this is a benefit, I think, to the defence industries in the States, Claire.
Yeah, so he's obviously pledged this huge package.
They've chopped the photo off. Maybe we'll see the photo of the story. Anyway.
He's pledged this huge package. It's taken 6 months to get through Congress. There's been loads of fight back from the Republicans. He's finally got it through. Loads of the equipment's been sent today. I think they already had stuff in Europe, so it could be sent straight to Ukraine. So it's great news for Ukraine, and obviously Russia have been making loads of gains, which is deeply worrying for the world. And just to go back to the 2.5%, 2.5% is also a signal that NATO, that Europe is united against Russia. It's something you have to say because Putin will be emboldened if Europe is not spending a lot of money on defence.
In cash terms, Britain, the UK, is already the 5th largest spender in the world, behind the US, China, Russia and India. Some counts have Saudi Arabia ahead as well, but that's disputed. But nevertheless, I just think it's the wrong policy. You want to spend it better, not more.
And if you end up with Trump in the White House, he's already said that if Europe isn't funding itself, if Europe, loads of countries like Germany, Rishi Sunak's been to Germany, they don't even meet the 2% of GDP on defence spending at the moment. If Trump ends up in the White House, which is a real possibility in November, then you have he's already threatened to withdraw funding and that America won't defend Europe. So.
I don't think another 0.2% would fill that gap.
Strong signal.
We've got to... We've got so much to pack in tonight. I'm going to take a break now. We haven't quite got through your list already. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including The Guardian reporting on that mayhem in central London as several military horses broke loose and ran wild. Such a dramatic picture, isn't it? Back with that and more in just a moment.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. Helicopters have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police. Made by people who dare to challenge.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier.
Why?
Meeting you.
Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Kevin Maguire and Claire Ellicott. Let's go to the front page of the Daily Mail, shall we, Claire? This incident at this school in Carmarthenshire in which teachers and a student were injured as well. They've got more details, obviously, on it here. But it comes as both unions and the government talk about behaviour in schools. And in fact, government figures just released showed that the number of school suspensions in England rose to more than 260,000 in the spring term of 2023, the largest number on record for one term. Department for Education showed there are 3,000 permanent exclusions in the spring term last year. And the way that schools respond to this idea of code red, about taking cover, about lockdown, even though knife attacks on teachers are extremely rare, just shows people do need to be aware of this.
It sort of has echoes of what happens in the States where, they have gun attacks all the time and terrible things happen, but you don't expect it in Britain. And the fact that there was actually this real code red system where pupils had to turn off their phones and they had to hide in classrooms or go over fences to protect themselves. I mean, it's great that they have the system, but wild that they need it. But we've seen this story. A teacher was stabbed in the neck by a girl who's a Year 9 pupil.
Yes, allegedly, we say at this point because it's an active case.
Yes, she's being held for attempted murder. I mean, it's an absolutely extraordinary story. And it sounded like the pupil allegedly went in to attack the teacher. A teacher got involved, another pupil got involved. It's just, there's this random school in Wales. It's quite an extraordinary story. And loads of details come out today. I think there's a clip about what's happened.
Which people want stopped. Don't put it out on social media because it leads to contempt of court, identification issues and stress also for those pupils involved in this.
Of course.
We obviously have to be very careful what we say about this because somebody is in with the police.
No. And initial reports suggested two pupils were fighting, teachers got involved and they got injured. But this account is very different. It's very different. This, if it is accurate, and of course it'll be tested in court and there will be a due legal process, and quite rightly so. But it is disturbing in the context of those other figures. Now, there's always been trouble in schools. I remember fights when I was at school. I was involved in one or two myself, but I don't remember people producing knives. I don't remember their involvement at all.
Yeah, difficult to speculate, obviously, at this stage. But if you look at the Times, we talked about the behaviour in schools generally. England worst in the world for underage drinking. Third of 11-year-olds have had alcohol. As a study says, middle classes normalise harmful habits. Very quickly, because I do want to get to the horse incident
as well. This is a huge study from the World Health Organization putting Britain at the top of underage drinking. I mean, it's an absolutely mad story. says a third of 11-year-olds have drunk alcohol, and half of 13-year-olds in England have drunk alcohol, and that's the highest rate in the world. And we've heard so much about university students cutting down their drinking. You know, loads of them don't drink anymore. But actually, what this study is saying is that there's a generation lockdown. The kids who came through all of the lockdown and COVID, COVID when it engulfed the world, they've actually been raised in the system, and it's normalised drinking for them.
Also among the worst for vaping and smoking amongst young kids, which is not. Look, I want us to be the top of tables, but not this one.
Yeah. 30 seconds on the picture story of a number of papers: the Mail, the Times, the Guardian, the horses. Kevin. It
was extraordinary. You saw it and you thought,
Telegraph as well.
Is this real? And of course, unfortunately, the
bloodied white horse.
I know, that's horrific. It collided with a couple of vehicles. Was it a taxi and a bus running? They were calmed. I hope they're okay, but. Yeah. It's surprising more people weren't injured when you consider the way they were running around, panicked.
And builders had dropped from a great height building materials.
Yes.
Should they have dropped while horses were there? Should they have been training while the building was happening? So,
I mean, London's one big construction site, isn't it? So.
Claire Ellicott, Kevin Maguire, thank you both very much indeed.